Hello, and welcome to another edition of 10 Minutes with Dr. Tysana. I am your host, Dr. Tysana Jones from MindWorks Collaborative. We at MindWorks are committed to improving equity and the quality of special education programming by attracting, equipping, and retaining a diverse pipeline of special education leaders. This series is created to gather sage advice from leading educators and practitioners on topics that can fast track educators and our broader community to success, both inside and outside of the schools and classroom. Our hope for each episode is to offer tangible and practical takeaways that can be applied to your personal and professional lives right away. This month, we are focusing on autism. And today's special guest is me. So Martrice, our executive director, is here to interviewing me. If you notice, I love talking about the field of autism. So Martrice is like, well, we have to get you talking about something that you love. So I'm like, okay. So Martrice, take it away. Welcome to being in front of the camera.
Thank you. You know, this is not where I like to be. So I'm stepping in, I'm stretching, I'm like doing this thing. And I'm super excited to get to spotlight you and your expertise and kind of like your life's work so far. I'm working with students and families who are in the autism community. And so I'm super excited to switch roles with you for a second, just for this session. So Tysana, I would love, or Dr. Tysana, I would love for you just to kind of give our community some background information. Tell us a little bit about your career path.
So my career path all over the place. At this point, I think my favorite place to be has been in the classroom. I think back to my very first field experience as a sophomore in college. And autism, I didn't know much about it like most of us, right? And so I was at a special school and I got assigned to this kindergarten class. And it was a kindergarten class full of kids with autistic-like characteristics. And something about that space, I used to love going. Every day was like trying to figure something out. So I fell in love in that moment. I came into special education because Black men were dying and, all the things were happening to Black community education, which is why equity lives in my heart. And so, but as a special educator, you have to choose an exceptionality. So I chose autism and I kept working with everything else that I do. So I've done that, been in the classroom, went to academia, got my PhD in special education, teacher education. We met along the lines of Ed Pioneers. So looking at, equity, the equity space, my dissertation is in multicultural education. We don't even use that term anymore, but essentially it's like this diversity, equity, and inclusion before they called it diversity, equity, inclusion. So
you think teachers and families should be keeping in mind in relation to autistic children and communication?
Okay, so thank you for asking that. So one of the things, communication is the thing where I constantly push my parents and teachers that I'm working with to focus on communication, effective communication for kids with autism especially, but for all of our kids. And it may look different. And so when you add this COVID thing to it, we're adding kids are not hearing language in a natural environment. Kids may only be receiving even more things as far as being online. They're not interacting with peers, or they're in the room with peers who are interacting if they're receiving their instruction at home. Sidebar conversations where our kids learn about the hidden curriculum. We don't really have them like we would have them in a regular ed classroom or in a school building. And so the dynamics of school have just really changed in how kids are even receiving communication. It's just it's all over the place. And so we need to be really conscious and focused and intentioned about how we're going to collect data as it pertains to students' communication skills, their language, expressive, receptive, depending upon where they are in the spectrum, as well as where they are age-wise. And so I'm gonna start with one thing. As far as communication overall, we have to think about what effective communication is and not just get stuck with kids who are vocalizing on a consistent basis versus kids who aren't vocalizing on a consistent basis. And I'm using the word vocalizing versus talking because there's a spectrum of what that could even look like. We have kids who talk all the time, but they're not having a conversation with you. They're just talking. We have kids who aren't talking at all, but they may be vocalizing, making sounds, making words. And we have students who are vocalizing, not making sounds, making words, but at some level, it's an attempt of communication. And so what communication is? The ability to send a message and receive a message. And we have to be clear about why we're communicating. My push is for parents to focus on effective communication. Is that going to be through vocalizing? Is it going to be the use of AAC equipment, alternative augmentative communication devices? Is it going to be with sign? Is it going to be through language and words? And so when I'm setting up the classroom, I have all of it going on in my classroom. And so I want kids to hear me. I'm singing songs, I'm pointing to things, I'm signing things. I'm giving them all these possible ways of receiving the message that I'm sharing, and I'm providing them opportunities to give it back to me in a variety of ways. So this language-rich environment is really important. And as we're moving towards a more, we have more opportunities for technology, we can incorporate technology that everyone's using. We can coordinate phones, we can coordinate iPads. There's different programs that we can be using that allow students to communicate effectively through the use of pictures, through the use of systems and strategies that teach language through pictures and through things like that. And so being able to be open to the idea of all the possibilities is something I really want to impress upon our folks. It's about communication. Many of our parents share their fear of what happens when their 6'1" Black child is stopped by the police. That's a thing, right? And so how do we equip and prepare all of our children, especially our students who may have difficulties with social emotional behavior, as well as vocalizing consistently? How do we set them up for success so they're able to navigate that situation? So that effective communication as early as possible, consistently, is my biggest message for parents and practitioners to really focus what they're working on around communication.
Yeah, I like how you're kind of teasing apart, like, effective communication does not necessarily mean a student is verbal, or, students who are nonverbal may very well be communicating, right? But we just got to be tuned in enough to like be able to catch all of that communication that's happening. Like, how do you support families through this? Like when it comes to an IEP team meeting and they're like, no, like the goal is for my kid to be talking. And you're like,
until they do talk, because they may not. And I've been very honest with parents. Okay, your child might not talk. There might not be a conversation. There might be, we don't know. But until they do, how are they going to communicate with you? You can't be the only one that understands when they need to use the restroom. You can't be the only one that understands when they're hungry for this and this, because you may not be around. You can't be around 24/7. And one day you're not going to be here at all. Like, that is real. And so how do we set up systems for success that are generalizable? They're generalizable. So I need to know that we're using some level of a consistent program. There's a LAMP system. I'm actually doing a training right now on this LAMP system. It's the AAC strategy that's based upon motor organization. So everything is in the same place every single time. I've been in the field for so long. We use the PEC system, and you were picture exchange, right? And so back in my day, we were cutting these things out. Now you just upload things and you point to them on your computer. Right. I feel extra old, right? My friends have cut out PECs, many a PECs in my house. I've had pictures of parents. I just had pictures of everything, printing out pictures to make communication system. Point to your mother, find your mom. Mom is spelled this way. Teach, and just all the things, as many ways to get kids to see what's in their world and to give a name to them. Then we start the writing process. So we're teaching writing. So let's say 6'1" Black child with autism is stopped. They're saying no, because they've learned, they understand this has become, we have meaning making. No. And they might ask for a pencil, write, or let me show you my phone or something, so they can type in some information to communicate with the police officer, the bus driver, the person at work, whoever's not in their family. They can have an effective way of communicating with them if we're preparing them through systems that can be generalized.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought around, like, we get so, in the K-12 setting, like, it's like, how does this apply in school? How are they demonstrating learning? Like all of this stuff. But like communication can literally be life or death in certain situations. Of like in my head, like, yeah, like these are some of the conversations that we really need to be having with families and even other educators around like why looking at communication and, like you said, like setting up these systems of success is like super important, not just for these academic applications, but for like these real life applications.
Real life
Like,
application.
what does that look like? Like if I walked into Dr. Jones's classroom, like just give me like, in an hour, if I just popped in, was able to kind of look like, how are you supporting your students with effective communication? And then, how are you kind of setting those systems up? Like, what does that look like in real time?
So I'm gonna go back to my kindergarten classroom because it was very much a classroom for kindergarten children with autism. This was after school, everything. But we had schedules. We used the PEC schedule. We used the board maker for schedules. So everyone had their own individual schedule. Everyone's name, everything was so I had a mixture. So the program I chose for my master's was a mixture of best practices. So some schools at that time were just doing LOVOS. Some places were just doing teach. So everybody had their thing. So the program I chose, University of Kansas, said, no, we want to look at how do we best support our students. We want to learn about LOVOS. We want to learn about teaching. We want to learn about these possibilities, but we have to figure out what works for each kid because everything's not going to work for one. It's just not, there's no silver bullet, right? And so that I had certain things set up that were kind of teach-like. We also did discrete trial training. We did small groups. We did larger groups. So we had constant movement where our circles or our rotations went 15 minutes. Students were given between 3 to 4 sessions of discrete trial training a day. We had small groups for fine motor, OT things, as well as, and sensory. So we had all these different, just constant sensory things, and everything had a language component. So again, language heavy. You'll see, again, I'm singing songs, I'm signing as much as I can. I am not certified as an ASL person. However, I can sign some, the duck songs and the frog songs and all those wonderful, wonderful songs we sing a zillion times a day.
Yeah, so, as a former preschool teacher, I know.
Yeah, all those wonderful
songs. Right.
We sing about everything.
Yeah.
And so it's like giving them all these multiple ways of communicating information. Now I'm working with middle school kids, and I have 2 young people with autism at very different spaces in the field. One young man, I'm working on social skills and not talking over everybody all of the time when we're not in our one-on-one classes. And what does it mean to listen first and then add to the conversation? So that's one thing I'm working with him in, that effective communication. Yes, he's talking, but is he having a conversation with his peers? So we talk about those things. The other young man uses the LAMP system. So that is a training I'm going through as we speak, and hopefully that'll be something we can continue in his IEP. I'm pushing that anybody who's working with him have access and training for this system, because this is his system of communication. So we all need to be well-versed in it if we're going to be working with this young man. So just that is something I know. If I don't get anything done this year, whoever gets the child next year will see training before April.
Yeah. I think from this conversation, I'm walking away with a couple of things. Like one, like valuing effective communication, not valuing verbal, what did you say, vocalization, right? Mm-hmm. So not valuing like talking per se, but like communication in all of its forms. And like almost like this focus or like drive towards talking is like ableist in a way, right? And so it's like
I know people, they think that because you can't talk, you don't know anything, right? And it's like, no, that's the opposite of the truth. I mean, there's no truth there. And so don't discount someone because they're not communicating the same way as you communicate, or need assistance to be able to communicate effectively. But we can wait 5 minutes to get them to type text, whatever they need to do to be able to. We have to allow people to be themselves and not create these environments where you have to do it this way in order for it to be normal or acceptable.
Yeah.
Just wait.
Yep. Just wait. And so I think that shifts us. Yeah, that shifts the focus as an educator, and it shifts the focus as a parent from like, oh, I need to fix this child so because they're not talking, versus like, I need to like remove the barriers from them to be able to effectively communicate with other people. And so like, I love kind of like that shift in thinking and like making sure, again, when you're designing an IEP, or like you said, getting that training for your teachers, this is like, how are we removing these barriers to communication versus how are we fixing this kid to be able to talk? Like, I love it.
And that's a huge paradigm shift over the last 20 plus years, is everyone's not going to do it the same. Removing the barriers. This is where I'm in love and fell in love with UDL, Universal Design for Learning, because the goal for UDL is, if it's a physical barrier, we remove it. If it's a mental barrier or a space barrier, it's removed. You don't want your classroom or your home to become handicapping to someone. Someone may have a disability, but that disability doesn't have to be a handicap because they can't get into the building. We're losing so much natural talent in this country because some of these places have steps. So someone who can't get around can't work in this building because of that issue. So that what's been the cool part about COVID is there's been some people who have been doing amazing because they're online. I have some kids with some serious anxiety stuff going on that it's like dissipated, and their IEPs mean nothing because online they're rock star students because that barrier that was causing their anxieties, they've been removed. And so think about removing barriers versus fixing a person. That no one's broken. Like, people are just different and need different things. And so we can't do the one size fits all in most clothes. And it certainly doesn't work in learning. And teaching and learning doesn't work a one size fits all. Everyone is supposed, there's some level of differentiation everyone deserves. And then your IEP allows you to even create even more changes for the access to the material. Yeah.
Well, this was fun. I think we did a little bit longer than that 10 minutes, but like, we got it. We good.
Well, thank you, my trees.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. I must say, this was kind of fun doing this flip session. I won't do it again, but I appreciate you. And thank you, community, for watching and joining us today. And hopefully you picked up something from Dr. Jones.
All right. Thank you, guys. And we'll see you next week.
Yes, see you next week. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.